Right. Tonight is the basic E training, which we just kind of wrap up a number of different things. We wrap up kind of the base traditional federal and state return process. And then as soon as we finish that up, we quick introduce you guys to some of the variations on that. So over the summer, we see a lot of folks doing amended returns, doing prior year returns. That's not the kind of thing we're going to throw at you, probably your first one, but we want you to get familiar with it. And we'll run through some things to look for with those. And then we'll talk about the M1PR, the property tax refund. We've alluded to that throughout. It is its own return. And over the summer, we do quite a few property tax only returns. So you're going to absolutely get familiar with that one. Reminder, you can follow along in your manual. We're going to have the numbers of the relevant pages up in the top right corner. And so to begin, if you want to open your manuals up to page 27, page 27 is where we start looking at how to finish return. I'm going to quick grab my All right. So we've talked a few times about the importance of checking our work by viewing the return, looking at the actual PDF, the actual 1040 forms to which our data entry has been transcribed onto. And so we have a handful of ways to do it in TaxSlayer, which is one of the few. There's often a handful of ways to get around TaxSlayer. This is one where I like that they offer us a number of options. So the summary or print section, this is going to be one of your options on your left-hand bar. Print results, you can access right up there through the view and print return thing that it'll navigate you here. A key thing to just keep in mind is to be patient. TaxSlayer is very slow to load a PDF. It will be very annoying if you wait 30 seconds for a PDF to load and then you keep getting interrupted because 7 more PDFs load because you couldn't stop clicking the button. I get it. I've done it. Just let it do its thing. It will eventually open a PDF, I promise. All right. And yeah, we just want to keep looking over this to check our work. Remember, in a lot of our sections in the manual, if you're looking for something in particular, we have these headers. Here's an example on page 98. I'll hold it up for standard deduction. These sort of tables. The third column will tell you where on the tax returns to find it, to help you get comfortable navigating which forms to look for and which lines on those forms to look at. So, way that TaxSlayer tries to help us out is by giving us validation errors. So there are a number of things that TaxSlayer automatically checks. Most of these you have to fix before we can finish things up. Some of them don't show up until pretty late. Some of them show up while you're on a particular page doing the data entry. And we got to fix those before we send it for review. If you're sending it to the reviewer with that up, that means that you are missing one, or well, frankly, you're not going to be able to get through the finishing stuff that we're about to show that we want you to have set before you get it to review. If you're ever unsure of a validation, obviously that's a put your hand up and get some help from someone. But we have 2 types of them, right? So we're gonna have these red ones with a triangular exclamation point, which indicates that you cannot advance until you fix it. And then we have these yellow ones with an exclamation point in a less ominous shape, the circle, indicating that you might want to double check something. Something you've seen is unusual. For example, the one we have up here, W-2 says that there were taxes paid to the state, but we haven't started our state return. That's a good, helpful thing for TaxSlayer to remind us, because we should file the state one if we paid some taxes to them, at the very least, to get it back if for some reason they shouldn't have it. So pretty straightforward there. specifically about the state validation errors, you can see that these aren't quite as fancy, right? We don't have the nice little boxes and icons the way we do for the federal ones. Generally speaking, with TaxSlayer, and probably all of the commercial tax software products, they're not putting as many resources into each individual state as they are the federal. And so it's going to look a little more thrown together like this, right? So we just kind of get these lists of them. They put at the top. You are not going to be able to file the state return unless the corrections are made. So you should think of all of these as those big red letter ones, right? The other thing is for navigation, this is an area where TaxSlayer doesn't make it easy for us. It's not going to direct you to it the way that the federal ones often are. The federal ones will often take you right to it to fix it. You're gonna have to get back into the state return in the left side and figure them out. Any questions on the error messages so far?
So even for the warnings, will they let you move forward, or they just won't?
If they're yellow on the federal, yes. If they are on the state, no. And you should not just move forward, you should check them and then move forward. All right. So once we are through a return, we go to the e-file section. This is where we're kind of done, like applying tax concepts and entering data. And now we are setting up to file the return on behalf of our client, customer. There's this very helpful kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, progress bar, indicating the various forms that you're going to complete in order to get a return entirely ready to file. This is a TaxSlayer is a modification of a commercial software, and so they leave in a handful of kind of, I don't know, spaces along the progress line that don't apply to us. So don't worry about those. When we get in and navigate, we'll skip through. Actually, I believe they come up and we just kind of move through them. Like it will come up with a $0 fee because we obviously don't charge anyone, and then we'll just zip right along. Yes, sorry, I don't know if you fee summary, state ID license, and custom credits. Nope. And they are listed on page 28. It'll tell you. So if you want to right now, actually, you can see there are arrows pointing to them. If you want to take something and draw a big old X over it, that's probably good practice.
Also, it's gonna talk for like a little while, and then we're gonna go in and finish Tina's return together. If you want to go into there and look at what he's looking at, you can.
Yeah.
We're gonna do it together. Just so.
Sorry, just looking ahead. Okay, so this next section, I'm going to walk you through each one of these tabs one by one. They're not really tabs. It's not tabbed. You have to. I want to distinguish it from tabs because you can't jump one to the other. You must progress in this order and back out through this order. So first one, return details. First thing we see on return details is how we ought to send the return. Our choices are e-file and paper file. E-file, obviously going through the wires and tubes of the internet is quicker. Paper filing takes longer. I would say we, generally speaking, our principle is, and not generally speaking, this is our like guiding principle is that, the taxpayer is kind of the one driving the return, and we go along with their preferences. If someone expresses a preference for a paper return, we will confer with them and work very hard to talk them into e-filing. E-filing is more secure, it's faster. From our organization, and we much prefer it because we actually know it gets filed. We do not do the mailing. That's a key thing. The customer has to do the mailing. We see people who will come back and ask us questions about their return the year before, and in the process of trying to help them get set for this year, we realized that they never mailed the documents we handed back to them. Happens fairly often. So we try to e-file whenever possible. There are a number of scenarios where folks must paper file. And in those cases, we set them up with envelopes and we'll print them off to do it. I think a lot of our customers who request paper filing aren't aware that no matter what, we are going to give them a paper copy of the return. Even if they e-file, we will print it off for them. We will staple it for them. We will put it in an envelope. So that to me is primarily what is happening for them when they request a paper return. And we push to e-file. Okay. I didn't know I could do that on the trackpad. Sorry. All right. So the second part of return type, if you look in your, if we want to get to page 29, if everyone wants to get to page 29, return type options are sort of a combination of the manner in which we are going to submit the return to the IRS or State Department of Revenue. And the second part of it is whether it's a refund or a balance due, right? So we're familiar with what refund and balance due mean by this point. We have various manners of receiving a refund or paying a balance due. And so the drop downs that we get on the return type menu are combinations of these. So it'll be e-file, direct deposit, e-file, paper check, e-file, direct debit, paper file, direct debit. You can write your account on the paper filing. E-file, but mail a payment, right? And we're gonna have to select these for both the state and the federal return. Any questions so far? We will cover that. And yes. So this is kind of what I referred you to on page 29. We got it up on the screen here, right? So there's going to be a drop down with those various options. And you can see first, we're saying the manner in which we are going to send in this tax return, e-filing, and direct depositing that large sum of money. That's great. That's the fastest. That's the most secure method. And again, we must do this for every return. So we got 3 of them here, right? There's an M1PR, a state, and a federal return, and we must pick all 3. Now, the options folks have for getting refunds are direct deposit into a checking or savings account or into a CFR prepaid debit card. That's on the green sheet. They'll indicate that they are interested in signing up for that, or in the process of talking with them, if they've indicated that they don't have a direct deposit option, hopefully you can point to the green sheet and tell them, did you know we can get you a card and have it direct deposited there? And then we'll get them signed up for that before you are done with them, because the sign up process will generate a routing number and account number. They can split the refund. We'll talk about that in more detail, but when you do a direct deposit, you have the option to split between a couple different accounts. That is not a totally without restrictions option. So we'll go into what some of the limitations are of that. They can receive a paper check. We get a number of people who do that and prefer that. I don't want you to maybe equate paper check with e-file. We push pretty hard to e-file. We will suggest or introduce the CFR card option, but we don't push someone who wants a paper check. They can also apply their refund to their 2025 taxes. This is pretty rare. I've never seen someone opt to do it here. It would have to be someone who has a sense that they might end up owing in the coming year, and that is not a position that most of our customers are ever really in. Most of them are regular refund recipients or just not certain that they would owe coming next year, right? Gray sheet is what our cutout is down here. Remember our gray intake sheet? This is the bottom of the front page. This is where the customer is going to indicate for you how they wish to get their funds deposited or to make their payment. Any questions on this? Okay, cool. All right, entering direct deposit. So now we've moved on to the next tab, right? So if we remember back from here, I don't know if can you all get it up in the text layer? Okay, folks can see this pretty well. Great. All right, so we're gonna move on to the bank account. We're gonna select the type of the bank account. You do not have to enter the name. Doesn't hurt to if you have it, but you don't have to. You need to get the deposit amount in there. We have this pull refund button that will bring the amount in. And then we enter twice to make sure we get it right, the routing number and the bank account number. A key thing that you will need to keep an eye out for if you go through it once and then never make a change. Normally this happens more at the reviewer level, but you might catch something at the last stage before you're about to send them to wait and put it into review. Make sure you redo hit pull refund if you've made a change that results in a new refund, because TaxSlayer is not smart enough to update that field until you tell it to.
Basic.
Nice. So if you can recall, oh yeah.
I was gonna ask, so we could.
Yeah. No. And so I would default to saying it's check. I would love to meet someone who works at a bank who could explain this to me, because I've never understood it. I've never understood. Yeah, doesn't make any sense to me. Yep. So our note, Minnesota refunds go to the first account listed. That is getting into the splitting a refund that I mentioned before. You cannot split the state refund. We'll talk about that more in a bit. But as a function of that, you need to remember, and also this is not going to be like the return type menu where we're going to make different selections for the state and federal. We are going to enter bank accounts if the customer wants multiple for the federal, and the state will defer to the first account listed always. Okay, where do we document? Oh, I have it frozen. Someone's direct deposit information on the gray sheet. So we want to see the routing and account numbers. Ideally, you will have them get out a check. You will have them get out some kind of statement that has it listed on it. A lot of people will have like a card from when they first signed up at the bank, where, you know, the person who sat with them and wrote out their routing and account number. I got a new account somewhere a few months ago. I still have mine. Alternately, folks have phones these days with them on it. If they're pulling it up on a phone, or if they just have it memorized and they're very confident in it, and they want to go that route, I know I'm kind of torn on that, because I personally really would have a hard time trusting someone doing it from memory, and also I know mine by heart, so that's a little bit of a double standard I should work on. If it's on the phone or coming out of their brain, we need to write that down, because your reviewer needs to have something to check that against. Remember, the reviewer is not going to have the taxpayer sitting across from them. So if they don't see anything and we haven't put that check or that bank statement that had the numbers on it into the pile of documents that goes with to the review stage, they're gonna have to pop out into the hall and double check with your customer. Oh yeah. Let me just explain. That's not what that is. Yep. It is not on the yellow sheet. It is on the gray sheet. Yep. It's on the back, and it's, remember, this is the section for you to fill out. And so you can indicate, you not can, you must please indicate whether they're not going to do a direct deposit or they're owing, whether you saw a check or something and you're going to include it in the stack of documents that go to the reviewer, or they took it off a phone or something, and so we don't have it written on a document, but somebody checked some sort of digital source or just knew it. Or, you know, maybe they called their kid or something who was at home, or called their bank to get it. I've had people call the bank, get it. Those are options too. A last bullet point, obviously, entering the wrong bank account is very bad. We don't want to do that. Just double check this very closely. We are very good at helping people get their taxes filed. It's a little tougher for us to help them navigate resolving issues like that. So that's one of the worst things we could do, would be to botch a bank account. So just double check. Let's make sure we get source documents for these. All right. So splitting refund, we've already talked about this or alluded to a little bit. The federal tax refund can be split into multiple accounts, I believe up to 3, and then TaxSlayer won't let you keep entering them. Pretty sure. I've maybe only seen one person ever get to that many. As I said before a minute ago, the Minnesota refund cannot be split. So whichever one, and this often impacts people's decisions, because especially of late with the very generous child and working family credits that we offer, that Minnesota refund is pretty substantial. And so whatever account they want the most money going into is probably going to be the first one, and they don't always want, I can't speak to why a person might want something to go one place or the other. I just know that Minnesota needs to match the first one rule often dictates folks' choice on which one they pick. And part of this is sort of an opportunity to get people, a lot of the folks who opt for this are the folks who want to do our save and win, but they don't want to put their entire refund into savings, right? Remember, for save and win, they only have to deposit $50 or more into a savings account of their refund. And so this enables them to set some aside and also take advantage of it for their expenses. Yeah. Yes. We'll cover that in a bit. We're going to go through and enter all that. Yep. All right. Now we've moved again. I'm not going to keep going back because it's very far, but we've moved on to another screen in our progression of finalizing the return pages, taxpayer consent, and custom questions. Who can remind me which intake sheet the mandatory customer consent pages are on? Will.
Red.
Yes, they're on the top of the inside fold. Yours aren't folded. They're on the top of the second page of the gray intake sheet, the P&P intake sheet. That's really counterintuitive for people, because I think people tend to think, oh, the IRS one must be the big heavy duty required one. Not the case. Remember, the IRS one on the yellow sheet is the opt-in for the program for sharing your tax information with all other VITA sites that may or may not even work. The gray one are things that we are required to get them to approve in order for us to e-file. Remember, we're never going to send anyone home for this. This would be a paper file scenario of someone with sort of elevated concerns about technology decides that this is a bridge too far for them, we're gonna let them say no, and we're gonna do a paper return. But this is the one that you must have them check and sign, and you'll have spaces on your tab. If you're following along, hopefully you can see it right now, where you'll have that same text and you'll click that they indicated yes or no. All right. Custom questions. So you're gonna have a lot of questions on this page. You'll notice that we start at 10 up here, right? 10 lines up with A there. The questions that come before are the similar but not quite the same questions from the yellow sheet. So there are demographic questions in both. You are required to enter them from the gray sheet. You are not required to enter them from the yellow sheet. Clients will often fill them in on both. It's not going to hurt anything if you just enter what they put on the yellow one. But it's not necessary. So if you can move through quicker, just go to the ones with a big bold required on them.
This is one of the things in the practice lab that's a little bit different from the actual online pro version of TaxSlayer. I believe our required questions don't show up in the practice.
Yes. Yeah.
So you'll be looking for them, but they're not there, but when
Because
you actually get to it, you'll see them.
It's enough of a lift for them to kind of customize the software for us. They don't go so far as to do it for the practice lab as well. And these are going to be on the front page of your gray sheet, underneath kind of where they start to enter their name and things like that. All right. Now the submission page. Now we're at the very last part of our little set of dots on a line to get through preparing it for a return. You are not going to print the copies. The reviewer is going to print the copies once they have checked your work, because we don't want to be printing pages that we might have to toss because there were a couple typos on them. The return status tags are very important. These allow us to track returns of interest for various reasons. So you can see there's things like Spanish and self-employment clinic, which help us identify, do we have enough volunteers for those areas? There's things like ITIN application or power of attorney, where we might potentially have to hold on to some documents and we need to know where those are. Paper returns are important for us to more quickly indicate, when a client who returns, or whoever comes in saying, hey, I haven't seen anything, we'll know right off the bat, well, that's because that was on you to get it in. Savers helps financial services know how many people have participated in that. Things like that. Pretty straightforward. Very important to do those.
Sorry,
Say it again.
like for Saver, for instance.
You would know they were a saver because you have talked with them about it and they checked the green sheet.
It's the same.
The save and win contest. Yeah, sorry. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So you should do this speed.
Correct.
It's in application.
Yeah, an ITIN application, they probably, I suppose if you're all gonna be volunteering here for the summer, maybe they did one with an L and then you kept going with it. I don't actually know off the top of my head. I'm usually sending people over here to do them. Yeah, those will be pretty straightforward. You'll notice at the bottom, it says transmit return. You will not have the power to transmit a return. You will have the power and the obligation to mark that return ready for review. This is very important because if you go over there and set down the packet of things for your reviewer to take this and finish it up, they are not going to be able to find this very readily if that button is not selected. That button puts it into a review menu within the software for your reviewer to see. So please do that. And then you're going to hit save and exit way down at the bottom right. And then we're going to tell our client, okay, now you're going to go sit out there. We're going to, I don't know that we have slides for this, but yeah, in terms of like what, well, we'll talk about that with the next step. We can talk about things we'll talk to the customer about before we send them. Yes. We tell them the results and we tell them their preliminary results, so we'll cover that in a sec. For now, we are going to go into Tax Slayer and we are going to finish Tina's return together. So if is everyone logged in? So if we want to get logged in and we want to pull up this return. All right, so if you're doing your own, keep doing that. But if you want to follow along with me up here, I'm going to enter one for mine. I don't have Tina quite as well filled in as you all do. Now note, I've got a whole bunch of state errors, mostly about the CRP. Like we said, in a normal tax layer context, I would not be able to proceed. In the practice lab, I can skip ahead. Getting a little warning on the federal returns. Oh, this was one we were practicing amendments with. Remember, this is an optional error, right? Because it's yellow. I'm going to be able to keep moving. And I'm going to keep moving. But obviously, you should check on those all before you move on in reality. Okay. Return details. Tina is going to e-file with direct deposit for everything. Oh, and sorry, because I am in a yes. No, I think it's, is that why? I think it's because that's why. I was doing this in the amendments, yes, I thought that would do it. Yeah, because believe the state must be paper amendment. I don't remember. You don't have to enter your email or PIN and everything, so this one pretty straightforward. Obviously, the biggest thing here is to talk to them and figure out which they want to do. We don't have fees. Bank account. I don't have copy of Tina's packet in front of me. So I'm going to split this in accordance with Tina's wishes across her two bank accounts. She wants 1,500 of her refund in her savings account and the rest in checking. So when we look over at the various refunds on the front page. It's okay. All right, so this is where we got to think through a little bit. If we want most of this to end up in checking, and our kind of key amount is for the savings is $1,500, which account do we want to put first? Checking. Because if we pick the savings first, even though we can say that deposit amount here, that would require her to put all of her state money into the savings as well, and she doesn't want to save that much. So we're going to start off with the checking because this is what the state will pull by default. All right. And now, even though this isn't a mandatory field, I'm going to go ahead and do it. Routing number. Great. It's on the very bottom of the second page. Yep. All right. And now I get to the account number. Get that right. Another one. I did. I knew I said it. I just said I just did it. Yeah. All right. Now I'm going to do a little math and subtract 1,500 from 8,013. Oh, my num lock isn't on. There we go. I have entered the amount of Tina's federal return less $1,500. Now I'm going to go to bank account number 2. I'm going to select savings because that is the type of account that it is. Bank again. This time I can skip ahead and I'll just do 1,500. Routing number. Routing number. And savings account number. All right. And we are done. Oh, you know what? Maybe you can split it across a check and I've never come across someone who wanted to do that. No, I'm saying I didn't know that there was an option to do a portion on paper. Never seen anyone select that. That would, yeah. All right. So you'll note the key thing here. Remember, we don't get a state option. So we got to talk through what they want to do with their state return and explain their limitations for that. Yeah, Olivia. Yes, because that as a whole will just go to the first bank. Yep. Yep. All right. Because it's the same bank, correct? Yep. She just has two accounts at that bank. All right. Any questions on the bank account page? Am I going to move on? All right. We can ignore this one. Say that again. So yeah, remember we want to make sure only the savings is 1,500. So you got to do a little bit of math to put the rest of the deposit into the first line. You do need to write out the deposit amount to each bank. And she told us in her interview notes she wants 1,500. All right. Correct. They will add up to the federal only. Because the state just automatically will be one lump sum. Yep. Correct.
Oh, so my number. I didn't do.
All right. So this one, even though it'll have the little required asterisk, you'll see it says optional up top. We're gonna skip through that. Now we are on to our consents page. So first consent here. What should I put based on Tina's information? Doesn't really matter. It's optional. I don't even know if she checked this off. I don't have the yellow one in front of me. Did she opt into this or can someone tell me? This might be the very back page. Blank. All right. So we don't care. We're going to skip it. And remember, oh wait, well. So we'll get through our custom questions about Tina. Remember, it starts. So the other thing I'm gonna go back and say is remember there are more consent questions. It appears they are just not in the practice lab. So the ones we want are the gray sheet ones. Those are the important ones. You'll also notice it automatically hit decline. We're not going to by default enroll her in that. We just decline is the same result as not filling that in. I don't know that off the top of my head. Is it not autofill? I thought it autofills in the real. The taxpayer zip code? Okay, cool. Thank you. Taxpayer zip code is the PIN. If you need a reminder of that, that will be in your manual on page 34. Thank you. All right. So again, that's not any kind of identifying piece of information for you, is the takeaway there. All right. Now we go on to the custom questions. Remember that the P&P custom questions are the ones we are interested in. And we are not going to answer these ones off the yellow sheet, but they're not in our practice lab, P&P ones. So I'm going to just move on. No custom credits. All right, and now we're on the final page, the submission page. We get a little summary of the federal refund amount and the state refund amount. We get a reminder of our return method. So we're kind of double checking our work on this set of forms here. Make sure these are right. We didn't botch any of those. Double check our routing numbers and account numbers. Looking good. Check my savings too. All right. Remember, I'm not going to print because that's not my job. That's the reviewer's job. We don't do this customer portal thing. That's another piece that's kind of left over from this being a commercial software. Is there anything I need to tag this return as? Ready for review at the bottom, correct. That's not what when we say tags, we mean these ones in the middle here. And it's not up here, but if this were in a normal tax clinic situation, I would have an option for a saver. So this is the practice lab defaults. We have our own custom tags, and I would want to make sure to tag this as a saver because Tina has saved 1,500. She's going to do our save and win contest. And I'm done. I'm all set. I am gonna hit save and exit. And I'm done. And I wonder if I can. No, I don't have a reviewer menu for this. I can't show you people ready for review. That shows up for reviewers up top. All right, any questions on that? Yeah. Pretty sure red. I don't remember. Yeah, I believe it's black and a negative. I'd have to change a fair bit to make her O. But it will not be nice and green. It will be black. I might put parentheses around it as well. But you'll get an indication that it is owed. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. You wrote the notes. Okay, we'll cover those later. Yeah. I wouldn't say you have to write a note for that in the future though. You'll have a tag for it. Yep. So there's different things. There's notes that you will write on your intake paperwork. That's more of an intake paperwork note. The sticky note inside TaxSlayer is you would think about your rule for that one being, and we'll give folks a reminder, I believe, later in the training on how to do that. Those kind of notes are, this return is not being finished for some reason, and it is not being deleted. And I need to explain why. So I started halfway and then the taxpayer realized they didn't have information from their job. Or I got halfway and then they realized they are actually self-employment. And so we're not going to delete my work, but we're going to move this to the self-employment clinic. Or the taxpayer came in, but they didn't realize they had to have their wife come with them. And so we're going to wait to finish it until the wife shows up with her documents. Like those kind of, this is not finished and it's not ready for review, but it can't be deleted. That's kind of your guide for when to do a note. Nope, that's an intake paperwork note for your review. That's when you're gonna, those kind of notes you're gonna write out, right? We don't need to stop the return for that. That's just helpful information. So we're gonna use the notes page that Will's holding up on the yellow thing. We're gonna write those there. Maybe we'll write them on the pink sheet. We're just gonna write it and communicate it to our reviewer. The notes in TaxSlayer, that's to communicate to the office staff. We're going to look in and say, why is this return here and it's not ready for review and it's not submitted? And they'll say, oh, well, it's because they had to leave for some reason.
If like the notes that you're talking about, you just And then this goes to the same thing. Oh, this is what's called.
Any other questions on Tina's return before we move along? Yep. What? Doesn't matter. Yeah, that's not part of our. Nope, because that was the dependent care thing. She can't pay her kid for that. Yep. All right. So Tina was one of our customers who got a nice big refund. We get a lot of those. Those are always fun. Less fun, but equally important and helpful are getting things right for our customers who end up owing money. Holly, do they all have the tax tip or shall I pass it? All right. Stand behind you. All right, so you're gonna follow along with this nice little guide. Or wait. I'll have a different.
These come out during the regular season, one of the projects, and thought it would be nice to have a handout, kind of as Mike goes through the stuff about master returns. These are gonna be available in clinics. Yeah. And they're available in the training site.
But yeah, but before we get into this, just to preface, at the end, Julie kind of asked about this. At the end of the initial preparation stage, right? You have just gone through and hit marked ready for review. You've saved and exited. You are putting all the forms back together nicely into the customer's envelope, put over on the rack for the reviewer in a spot that indicates needs review. You're writing out notes, on the yellow sheet for things you need to clarify. You need to, you need to tell the customer their results so far. Give the caveat that someone else is going to review your work and those could change. And then tell them, well, you obviously, backing up, you will have had to have told them what the result would be in order to determine whether they're going to direct deposit or pay. So at that stage, you need to tell them that's my preliminary results. Someone else is going to check my work. But for now, we're going to proceed as if that's right. You're getting a refund. How do you want it? You're owing. How do you want to deal with that? And so the first step is we're going to have to sit and talk with them, right, on whether they owe or are getting a refund. Refund's a lot easier. That's more of how do you get it? Owing, they have some options because, again, this is a service for low-income folks. Many of them are not going to have the money on hand to pay what they owe. And so we have this handout to help guide us. So what we mean here when we say for tax year 2024, right? We're going to give them, this means with the money that they owe now, what are their options? Below, we're going to try to help them prepare to not be in the same situation in the future. There are folks who just kind of are comfortable paying every year and they know it's going to happen and they just do it. And that works for them. For a lot of folks, it is a surprise that something has happened. Maybe they thought that their withholding with their job was better than it was. We'll talk about that. Well, we'll talk about those reasons right now, right? Why someone might have a balance due. Something happened with where their W-4 wasn't filled out in a way that totally matches their life situation, either because they didn't quite do the form right or because something changed and they didn't update the form. We have a handout about the W-4 that we can give them.
There's a picture of it.
I can't see it because it's an animation. That's all right. Yeah, we can give that to them. That's something that's great for them to read while they're sitting out in the hallway, waiting to get checked out after their review is finished. No tax withheld. This is, I think, probably the most common one, even more common than a W-4, just not quite being exact, because so many people these days are doing gig work where they are a contractor and they don't really realize it, and they're not setting aside taxes throughout the year. This is quite common among our customers. And then multiple jobs can end up with someone owing because an employer does not have access to that customer's global income throughout the year. So they're going to assume that their income for the year is only the stuff that their company is paying them. And so if you have 2 or 3 jobs, your employers won't get them right unless you kind of manually adjust it. I tweak mine a little bit to cover what I get here, right? But that's a kind of a complex part of the W-4. It refers you to a worksheet, and so I think a lot of people just kind of skip it when they go there. So those are some of the reasons. Hopefully you can identify these. This is kind of a good check of your work, not just a helpful thing to do for the client, is for you to be able to look at the return and get a feel for, okay, why does this person end up owing? And then you can look, well, okay, on their W-2, you know, they had 30,000 in income and only $500 withholding. That seems not very right? No tax withholding is pretty obvious. The multiple jobs things is less so, but you can point that out to them. If you're not sure why someone's owing, that's not something you should just shrug and wait for a review for. That's absolutely you can call someone over. Maybe it's as simple as, you know, the W-2 looks normal to you, and someone else who's seen a lot more will say, no, actually that looks low. But I would not, if that looks suspicious to you, just leave that be, right? If you see someone who's got $12,000 of income and 3 kids and they're owing, that should be a red flag to you. Doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. It's possible. Maybe not at that low of income. That's not really possible. But yeah. This estimator at the bottom, I assume that's on the W-4 handout. I've never referred anyone to that. Yeah. Right. All right. Options for paying a balance due. We have 2 sets of them. Oops, sorry. One of them is very literal. The other one is kind of not. Direct debit is very literal. Before that customer leaves, we are going to have them pick a date on which they want to pay their amount owed. They're going to enter their bank account much the way they did for a refund, and they're going to sign to indicate that they have authorized this. Is that on the gray sheet? Can I see a gray sheet? Yes, the balance due authorization is the last thing on the gray sheet. So we are not going to let anyone sign up for direct debit and then leave without acknowledging on a paper that we keep in our possession that they have, you know, understood that they are going to do a direct debit from their account. You know, that way no one can call us back and say, well, I didn't have the money in my account. I didn't know it was coming that day. That's kind of covering ourselves for that. E-file mail payment. So again, these headers up here are things that you are going to select on the return type menu. These are going to be in your drop down. Remember, it's a combination of method of transmission, method of payment. E-file mail payment does not mean they have to mail a payment. It just means that we are not going to make a plan for them to pay from their bank account right now. They can go to the IRS website to pay. They can go in person if they even still have offices with people working in them come next tax season. They can look into the various payment plan options. If they're really large, we will refer them to the low income taxpayer clinics. We have 2 of those. One is at the U Law School, and the other is at Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid. We have a whole handout we'll get into about how to make payments, but let's talk about these options one at a time. So the first one, direct debit, can be pretty simple, right? It's fast for people. They don't have to think about it. You can pick any date. A lot of times folks who will do this might be someone who is relatively early in the tax season, and maybe their federal withholding got botched a little bit, but their state was pretty good, and so they're getting $1,000 back from the state and owe $40 to the federal, and they're pretty confident they're gonna have a nice healthy amount in their account after they get the state refund, and maybe they say, yeah, that's April 14th, I'll pay the federal. Can be a challenging option. So if somebody, has pretty volatile bank account balances, they could overdraft. We don't want that to happen. So that's something to talk through with them. Are you sure on this date you are going to have the money in there to pay what you owe? Obviously this is very often just a function of how big the amount owed is, right? Normally anyone who's owing more than a couple $100, even $100 is not going to do direct debit. They're going to do our mail payment options.
Is the direct debit? Okay.
I don't know. The only thing I know about this, and this I'm hesitant to even offer this up because this isn't based on my PNP experience, it's at a different site, was I was told not to pick the current date. Like that. So I've never investigated that further, whether you actually could. But it's probably a good practice to pick a day out in the future. If you're doing a Saturday clinic, pick Monday. Can't hurt. Could hurt if Monday is holiday. Yeah.
Or also some of them have to give refund.
Yeah, over the summer we will be getting people with both refunds and owing. No. People will be paying and receiving refunds. Yeah. The majority of our I don't know if I'm just pretty sure the majority of our people get refunds. I think summer tends to follow the main year. Maybe you get a few more people who are catching up on back taxes and but overall, most of our people get refunds. But yeah, we do both whenever. It could come out either way. I would think that the direct debit date stuff is more relevant for normal tax season where someone's doing it on time and getting ready to avoid fees. A lot of the folks who are going to be doing them later are already going to be subject to those fees. And if they can pay, they're going to want to pay as soon as possible. And if they can't pay, they're just going to have to take the hit and try to figure out some kind of payment plan. All right. We got a little half sheet handout that we can give to folks. This is also in your manual on page 33 that real quickly goes over the various options for paying both the IRS and the state. The back side of this is in Spanish for those customers. You can see at the bottom, we direct people to those low-income taxpayer clinics that I mentioned before. Yeah, this is, I would say for your purposes, know this exists. This is something that the reviewer will put in with their return at checkout and the CSV will walk them through. They might want to see this sooner. If it was a pretty simple return, we're pretty certain it's going to be paid. So if you have the capability to give this some beforehand, that helps too. All right. So obviously someone having a balance due is pretty bad news. It's not always the most fun to deliver, especially if someone's caught off guard for it. My very first day at a VITA site, someone got roped into like helping like kind of with the final checkout part. I wasn't doing the reviewing, but I was sitting with a guy who went from thinking he was going to get like $2 grand back and being very excited to learning that the refund was due to a preparer error, and also the preparer didn't do his like ACA stuff and he had to pay all his health insurance. He went like, it was like a $4,000 loss in like a 20-minute span and he was just crushed. That's not the kind of thing you should like anticipate, but we just want to, know that that's possible. And practice a little bit being cheery and compassionate, not cheery. No, I mean like gleeful that they owe money. That's the wrong word. Understanding, and yeah, just basic, have some tact. Make sure they understand that your word's not final, but kind of prepare them for that possibility and try to let's move to like, there are options available for you, don't despair. That stuff. I like, that's a little dramatic. I wouldn't say don't despair to the client. So yeah, let's practice. I mean, I think for this kind of thing, generally for like dealing with customers and sort of like our equivalent of bedside manner, I practice talking to someone else the way you would like to be talked to if you were in that role. Yeah.
But he has to lose 4,000 because of his mistakes or something. So that's can happen.
It can happen. We try to avoid it. We try very hard to avoid it. But that's why we do the review. Yeah.
Things, okay.
All right. We are ready to get back to it. If folks want to grab a seat. All right. Real quick, anybody have any thoughts on the exercise? Anything that occurred to you when you actually tried explaining to someone that they suddenly owed the government some money? Or that was an easy conversation? Well,
You have all these options for you. Hey, this. You kind of like laying that out. Your story.
yeah. So what I would say is you don't have to go through all the options. You want to focus on the option of, do you want to pay now or do you want to think about what to do? Right? Because like what we need to decide right now to prepare is like whether they want to do direct debit. Otherwise, they've got time to think about what works for them. Yeah, that's a good point. We don't have to go that far. Anybody else? Okay. That's a grab the manager thing. Yeah. Yeah. Anything that gets out of control or escalates, grab us. And we'll go over that more like before the start of a clinic when you're learning it. Yeah. All right. So just kind of reviewing what we do at the very end, right? So you have talked to your customer, congratulated them on their refund, or consoled them about what they owed and prepared them in either way. You've marked it for review. Now you're just getting ready to have someone else review it. So we're kind of out of TaxSlayer and you're packing things together. You're going to review the pink sheet. You're going to make sure that you did everything on the pink sheet. I'm not saying you're going to go through and check it all off and just like move on. You're going to actually make sure that you did everything on the pink sheet. And if you need to go back into TaxSlayer and do them, even if it's annoying and you might have to like redo things, you have to finish that column of the pink sheet. Then we're going to write notes. We're going to write notes, as many as we can. Big stuff on the big open space on the yellow sheet is a great place for it. I think if you really want to get your reviewers' attention for something, the pink sheet is probably the first place to do that. So maybe even like a pink sheet note that says, look at what I wrote so much of on the yellow sheet. Or maybe you might have a handwritten sheet where you figured something out with the customer. Struggling for an example, but that does happen and you want to make a note on the pink sheet. You have a few lines, right, to tell things to your reviewer. Then we're going to explain to our customer, hey, remember what the CSV told you? We're done with that first part. You're going to go sit in our waiting area. And then someone's going to check my work and then come grab you. We're going to hand the boost your money form to the CSV. We are going to make sure that the person has signed the boost your money form if they have indicated they are interested in one of our programs. They must sign it if they're like doing Yeah, I mean, yeah, if they've checked anything, make sure they've signed it. Because we need their permission to do the save and win. We very much needed their permission, to do a CF archive. We should have already covered that if you're at this point. And we need their permission to do the referrals on there. And then you are going to put all of your items in the envelope. So that big envelope that you received all of Tina's case stuff in, not just like for this exercise, every customer will come to you with one of these. It should have their name and tax year filled out already. Fill that in if it doesn't.
Put all their documents back in, their ID and their social security card goes. all
And
of
their
that.
bank account proof,
Everything.
all of that. Do your reviewer a favor. You should have done yourself a favor and done this throughout the process. Keep like documents together. Keep identification documents together. Keep income documents together. Keep proof of things for adjustments and deductions together. Keep the rent certificate together, right? All that stuff makes it easier for everyone to make sure that nothing has fallen through the cracks. Yeah.
What is like each day?
We're not gonna get those level of documents. If anyone has those level of receipts, that would only be because they are almost certainly just a self-employment situation. Yeah. Or it's gonna be someone itemizing with a bunch of medical stuff, and that's gonna be advanced anyway. Sometimes we get a lot of documents and we'll just paper clip them together. Yeah. Oh, yeah, right, yep.
It's gonna be over there, and you're gonna look for the one that says returns to review, that's gonna be sitting right there, and you're gonna put your envelope
At the
in.
back. I should say too, we haven't really talked a fair bit about this.
Mhm.
Talk to your client. Oh, maybe we did the very first day. We want to make sure our clients know, right? We talked about making sure they know they have enough time. We do sometimes get people who are like, I am in a hurry and I need to get home for X reason. And it's not the kind of thing where we say, well, we're just not going to do them tonight. The biggest example is seniors who have Metro mobility rides scheduled. In those cases, that's make sure we get a note on the outside of the envelope so that the reviewer knows it. You should have told the manager by then if your manager doesn't already know that that person needs to go. And then you're gonna put that towards the front so that the reviewer can get that quick and we can get that person home. Yep. All right, some uncommon situations and forms. If you want to follow along, this is going to be in the manual from pages 38 to 44. You might never see these, but this is the kind of thing where I think, if this comes up for you 3, 4, 27 months from now, you want to remember that you've heard of this and you have resources available to help you figure it out. Never a bad idea to put your hand up and have an experienced preparer or reviewer or manager help you figure these out. Non-residents for tax purposes. These can be very confusing. If they show up here, they're going to be, under the false impression that they do have to do taxes, so it can be hard to get that information out. A lot of them are, we have 2 types of them. It's going to be people who maybe don't need to file taxes at all or do, but they're out of scope. Folks who are, and we have to separate this idea of residency from citizenship, because we have people who are not citizens but are residents, green cards or substantial presence people who are most of our ITIN holders. That's different. In my experience, the non-resident folks who we can't help or maybe don't even need to file taxes are pretty clear because they come in pretty confused. A lot of our folks who are residents know that they do have to pay. Citizen kind of helps. I think generally we catch these on intake, but if someone, for example, I had a woman come in and ask me what she had to do to report her incomes from her property that she owned in China where she was from. And that was nothing with me, ma'am. go on with your day. So yeah, that's a pretty one that shouldn't end up with you, but any indications that someone doesn't really live here permanently or make a home here, give us a heads up. International students is a big one. They are folks who we cannot help with returns. All right. Yeah. Say that again. Is that a student one? Yeah, they cannot be helped here. Yep. We have a referral for international students for a resource that can help them, but it is out of scope.
They will get past this VITA. That will build.
Let's hope not. Yeah, I can't promise, but you know, that's why I said screening is a screening, sorry, is a team effort at all stages of the process. Never too late to screen someone out for being out of scope. Yeah. Yes, that would be these non-resident substantial present folks. Most of them are going to be folks who have items for the taxes and social security cards for work purposes. Yep, and we do their taxes frequently. If they did, they might meet. Not every. It's hard to put these people in big buckets. I believe the ones who need to do non-resident returns would not have social security numbers and therefore would be out of scope. Yeah. We have more resources to cover these when it comes up. This is something to just look for and flag. If you get indications from someone that they don't live here for the purposes of taxes. Okay. Next one. This is a little easier to identify and a little more clear what to do. Folks who did not live in Minnesota all year, if they indicate that they moved halfway through the year from another state, we're going to run into an issue where we cannot do another state return. I believe both technologically we are precluded from doing that, and also it's just a poor idea because we don't know what other states have cooked up. There are a handful of states that do not have income taxes. In those cases, we actually can do both the federal and state return. For most of these folks, we can just do the federal return. It is usually a better idea to just do all the returns together, because often what we're going to unfortunately end up referring them to do is go talk to a prepare and go do some TurboTax, and they're going to have to re-enter all of the federal stuff anyway. And then you could goof and double file, and we don't want that to happen. We have a nice question right off the bat. Smartly, at the top of the Minnesota tax information section on our gray sheet, so that we can screen these folks out. Any questions on that? Pretty straightforward. All right. Identity protection PIN numbers. The IRS issues these PIN numbers to folks who have had identity theft in the past. In my experience, they all know that this is a thing for them. They've been through some sort of identity theft ordeal. This is one that we will not have the information to give them. We won't really identify. Maybe they'll come in with the letter and be like, what is this? Is this their first time? Yeah. Watch just for that checkbox and make sure if they've checked that, that they know what they're talking about. Sometimes someone might check that to say, you know, oh, I had identity theft once. You know, my credit card got stolen. That doesn't mean they're part of this program. I don't actually know about the opt-in. I'm pretty sure that does not happen through the tax preparation process. I think that's something you request separately.
I will say we have a CSB, Perry Montero, who said this did happen to her and she didn't request it. She didn't know about it. She kind of found out about it after her tax return got rejected.
Yeah.
So sometimes the IRS knows that someone.
Yeah, that's true. They initiate it, correct. I believe that might even be the majority of cases is the IRS initiating. Yes. It is on the next slide. Yes. No, and I believe it is a physical letter still. I think this is one of those things that is still actually coming in paper for them. We can look it up online. I don't want you to get too bogged down, and that will cover that if it comes up in the clinic. The online thing can be a pain with the IRS. Yeah. They would call the IRS. Oh yeah, we're not doing that. Yeah. No. Yeah, you're not authorized to do that at all. Yeah, that's too far. We will need to include this on any return that they had been issued. A lot of times I think we maybe kind of learn about it once we've submitted one and then there is a rejection. And yeah, we wouldn't want to. That bottom one is probably like that's something that a manager Willie would have to make a decision on, is filing without it if we feel like we can't get that PIN for him. All right. Filing for a deceased taxpayer. This does happen quite a bit. You know, a next of kin or a surviving spouse will come in and file. Remember, surviving spouse gets to file jointly in the year of it. And then we have that qualifying surviving spouse for the next couple of years. We might have to help these people, I guess, for figuring out, you know, they might not like have the relative who passed W-2, right? We might have to do some more talking with them on how to get a transcript from the IRS, things like that. We'll probably cover that at intake more. Should go without saying, but be compassionate towards folks, you know. Yeah, just say sorry for your loss. Before you're doing it, you know, you don't have to go further than that, but don't like do nothing. Just, you know, common sense. Yeah, I would say also just be patient with those people because they're often very flustered. They've often got all kinds of paperwork going on, and the taxes is just one part of it. So anything you can do to kind of like demystify how difficult the tax prep is going to be, because it almost always that's a good idea. It's usually not as hard as people are anxious about think. I'm not sure that there is. Holly, do you mind checking on that in the manual while we move on? Oh,
But we have resources to figure out that kind of question.
it's almost always a get the manager involved. I did one the very last weekend in tax season this year, for someone whose sister had died. But yeah, yeah, there is some additional stuff, but it's not quite as hard as it seems. Yeah, help get this stuff started. Yep, absolutely. And again, this is when we almost always catch at intake, because we're looking at IDs and they're going, well, like it's not the name that you have because it's someone else's return. This is a fairly easy one to catch at the desk.
But this is not for filing the tax.
No, this is for filing the tax return, because they might have had income through the year before they died. Yep. All right, power of attorney. We see quite a bit of power of attorney. This is almost certainly going to be a manager one. A lot of these end up being manager ones, not because it's like we don't trust you, but because of the nature of it. Like someone needs to go and print stuff while the taxes are being prepared for sake of time. So this is something your manager will take care of. But again, this is one that we should catch because it is right, like someone who, you know, is making it clear to us like, hey, my name is not the name that is on all these tax forms. Yeah, if you're interested, you can look more in the manual on 39 and 40. This is one where very often we're not going to be able to finish it if the person does not come in with a power of attorney document yet. that's not a deal breaker. We can start the power of attorney form, but they are going to have to leave and have the person for whom they are power of attorney sign it. Does everyone know what power of attorney means? It just means you're doing it on behalf of someone else who is usually elderly or sick and unable to. It's a lot of kids doing it for their, I mean, not kids, but you know, middle-aged people doing it for their elderly parents. Very, very common.
Out of the
That not so much. No. Although I suppose it could be. I have to think about that more. That you're getting into where there's just the income out of the country. But this is going to be a big reason why you might do a return that doesn't get finished that day, and then you're writing a sticky note. And will indicate it's power of attorney. I believe it. No, I don't believe. I know it's a tag at the end. All right, amendments in prior year returns. Because you guys are beginners, we're not gonna try to have you do a ton of amendments, but you might end up getting someone who surprises and says, actually, I have a couple of years. And depending on how complicated it is and how the rest of the clinic's going, you might get into doing them. So our amendment policies, this is the kind of stuff where it's we need to think through like timing for what's practical for us to get through in an evening or in a Saturday so that we can see everyone who's signed up. I don't know if we've ever said this, but as a general principle, we try to do 1 year of taxes per person unless time allows for more. So that's something where maybe this, yeah, we'll talk about that a little more with prior year stuff, I guess. But for an amendment, if they're just doing a renter's credit amendment, we can do that any shift. Any other kind of amendment, we're going to refer them to the self-employment ones on Wednesday afternoon. So we have a little more time and we have a little more experienced volunteer base to deal with those. This is a big time flag a manager one. And again, bottom line, you won't be expected to prepare an amendment, but you might run into a taxpayer who needs one. All right, so we have over the summer, we have a lot of people who come in doing old years. The deadlines for obtaining a refund are 3 years after the initial tax deadline. So for example, this past year, the on-time tax deadline was April 15th, 2025. 3 years after is 2028. And so during the 2028 spring, when we're mostly doing taxes for the year 2027, that last weekend or two, we're probably going to really focus hard on helping people who are really late with their 2024 taxes because we want to make sure they get their refund, right? Not such a big deal over the summer.
Yeah, this is just to say that if you're doing. Is there. The point to be able to.
Unfortunately, while refunds are only available for 3 years, being hassled for paying money you owe is available for quite a number more years. So we do get people who have to do those years. We would try not to give them to you, but we'll go through some of the resources if you end up with one. Now, the M1PR is different. The M1PR, you only get 2 years to do it. And sorry, 1 extra year to do it. So it's like 2 years in the sense you have the on-time year and then you have 1 plus. And I think of it as 2 years where it's like, you know, the 2023 year ends in 2025. 2024 year ends in 2026. These ones, right, are going to come up during this summer session we're about to embark on. So come August 15th, the clinics leading up to that, we're going to be really pushing hard on folks who haven't done the M1PR for 2023. They're not going to get it. Yes, correct. All right. No, because that one is not anything they'd ever owe on. So there's nothing to be compliant about. When we get into prior year returns, we run into some limitations on what we can and can't e-file in TaxSlayer. If you do get a prior year return, we have old manuals. We have sections in the current manual with some of the big high level differences across tax year to year. TaxSlayer, you know, is gonna lead you through it. I will say, as manager, I am going to avoid trying to give any of you a very old year. If we do it, it'll be because it was pretty simple and the clinic was pretty crazy. So just, you know, like anything else, know that you are empowered to get through it and you have people available to help you, and don't shy away from asking questions of those around you. All right. Paperwork for multiple years. We're gonna need separate envelopes. We need a separate pink sheet. All the intake paperwork. Very often what this will entail is me or someone else grabbing them and running over to the big printer over there and copying them. And then maybe they'll do some sort of, you know, actually that year I did have 2 W-2s and we make a marking up, mostly to get the main info on the front sheet, just quick recorded, because that's going to be the same, right? That's always going to be their current address, things like that. Yep, those last two summarize what I just said. All right. Now we are going to get into the property tax refund, the homestead credit refund. I'm not going to ask questions about these nutty situations because I don't want us to get off track. Just, you know to flag your hand and talk to your manager if any of those come up. And yeah. All right. So the M1PR, I'm gonna explain this a lot in terms of comparison and contrasting with the rent credit that we talked about this weekend. So like the rent credit, the M1PR, the idea is that you have paid throughout the year some property taxes, and based on your income level, we think you deserve to get a little bit of a break on those, is what our legislature had said. For the renter's credit, that process happened through the rent you paid to your landlord, and then your taxes your landlord paid to the state. For the property tax return, the property tax credit, you are a homeowner, you are paying that directly. But it's that same idea where it's a function of how much you paid and how much your income was, determines on the table how much your refund is. The due date for this one again is August 15th, and the check comes out pretty late too. The whole reason this is on a bit of a shifted calendar compared to normal taxes is that the counties take a while to get the property tax statements that we require out. So yeah, some basics of it. You don't have to memorize these numbers. Max refund is 3,410. The income has to be less than 140,000. But again, remember, you know, imagine a big table of income and amount owed, and not everyone fits under that curve. So it's like you'd have to be paying through the nose at 140 grand to get some stuff back. Taxpayer cannot be a dependent of somebody else. We can think of that making sense, right? Because for some of our dependent stuff, we get into support tests. Owns and occupies a home on January 2nd, 2025. This one is one that people can kind of forget a lot. Someone can live at their house most of the year and then move, and they'll still be in the thinking that they paid property taxes through the year. It's actually kind of looking ahead. It's a goofy credit. Just keep that January 2nd date in mind, because you could very well get some situations where that unfortunately makes it so someone can't do the M1PR. Lives in a property classified as homestead. This is a designation that a person has to sign up for when they I don't know, I'm not a homeowner, so I don't know how all this stuff goes. Yeah, you have to tell the county that you are a homestead. It designates that this is your primary residence and not some sort of like second home or investment property. And that status needs to be set in stone for them to get the credit. This is not something that a person could be like, oh, go talk to your county and then come back. This is, if you did not have this on January 2nd, you are out of luck.
The other thing is,
It will say on the property tax statement. Yeah, I think we're going to look at one in a second and we can point them out. And they can't owe delinquent property tax on the homestead. I've never seen this. I think it would show up on the statement. And I think the person would probably avoid coming in because they know that they don't want anything to do with property taxes. All right, so key thing is you're gonna want to look for, we are filling out a 2024 form, like I said. But it's that kind of looking ahead to the next year. So they need to come in with a form that says 2025. Lucky for us, we are doing this in the summer. In the winter season, especially when they come in around March, people will come in with the wrong form. And we'll have to tell them, no, that's not it. They might still come in with the wrong form, but we know for sure that the county will have published the right form. So a lot of what I end up doing all summer long is running over to the printer and running back to you the correct property tax statement. We can see, I'm gonna try to find where it says it's homesteaded. It says homestead exclusion. I thought somewhere else it indicates my.
The property classification.
And in the manual, I think it's set.
So I think homestead exclusion.
Two down, right there, but two down, property classification.
There we go. HSTD. Okay, that's what that stands for. Thank you. Yeah, so that's how we know what it is. Make sure you check for that. Again, you're gonna have to send someone to print it for you, so we will check for that as well. If they don't have that done, we know how to talk to people so that they know how to do it, and we will say sorry that you're out of luck for this year. Yeah, we'll talk through some situations that can occur. If someone's experienced a foreclosure, then they will not qualify for a refund because they no longer own the home. Again, that would have had to have occurred. Well, I'm trying to think how that fits with the January 2nd thing. I don't know. We'll think through that if that comes up. Part year residents, we want to look at income from all states. That's an important one. If someone moved here during the year. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. So where foreclosures could happen is one can be in a foreclosure process and still in the home. I didn't know that. So yeah, that would be someone who does not qualify. Thank you. And taxpayer lives in a co-op. They will get a property tax statement from the co-op because the co-op as a building will pay property tax, and then we'll need to know the taxpayer's individual portion of that. I've never seen that. So if it comes up, wave me over because I'm curious.
It's a pretty rare.
I believe so, yes. Yeah. All right, mobile homes. Mobile homes are fun. Mobile home setups are one rents the lot of land under one's mobile home and one owns the mobile home itself. That means that one gets a CRP for the lot and has a property tax statement for the property tax statement for the mobile home. So you're going to be in a groove. You're going to be going, I've done renter's credits all summer. I got this. I'm not thrown by the fact that they have a property tax and a CRP. I'm going to go into the renter's credit, and then I'm going to go do the M1PR. Wrong. You do not do the renter's credit for them. The CRP will go on to the M1PR. You'll have a space to enter a CRP. It'll end up being very straightforward. We also do get mobile home folks who are renters. And so then we would do a renter's credit. So they will know if they own the mobile home or not. Yeah. No, sorry. So it's bigger than a van, but it's the idea that they're these Nope. They're like a kind of cabin, or imagine like a trailer on a semi, except it's got a roof and has been fitted out nicely in the interior, and one can move it from spot to spot, but then you set it down somewhere. Yeah, it's like a small house. Yeah. That can easily be moved. Yep. I'm trying to think of where some parks are around here. I don't actually know. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think I know there's one north of the river, but I don't get up there very often. All right. Some uncommon scenarios. So we do get folks who co-own units and co-occupy units. So these can get mixed together in your head. You want to really distinguish between someone who lives there and doesn't have any ownership stake and someone who co-owns it with the taxpayer who comes in. So first off, this is something that can only be on one person's tax return, or in a case of a married filing jointly couple, that joint return. If there are two folks who are not going to be on the same tax return, this is not like the rent credit where everyone's going to get a CRP that splits the rent down the middle and they all get that. One return will have the property tax on it. They need to figure that out. We're always, if they live together, we are going to assume that they are both pooling their resources to pay the property tax. And we are going to consider both persons' income when determining how much credit they are entitled to. If they co-own it, but only one person lives there, we are going to assume that the person living there is the one responsible for paying the property tax, and we will only consider their income. So it would be shocking to me if we ever had a co-owner who didn't actually live at the place come in and try to get one. I've never seen that. But yeah, just know if someone says, you know, I own it in part with my sister who like invested in part of it, but she doesn't actually live here, we don't need to send them home or call their sister to get her income. It's only if they live together. And then we would talk about having their co-owner come in and show us their tax return. All right. Homeowners living with other adults. So someone who lives with you, but doesn't own it with you. They still are considered a person who is, by embarking on cohabitation with you, pooling their resources with you to sustain the household. And so we will include that income when determining the credit. We're not just going to assume that because the co-occupant doesn't own it, that they're not shipping. I mean, sorry, I don't want to say that they're not, assume they're paying the property tax, because that doesn't really matter, but this is all sort of a proxy, right? For like, who's putting money in that goes towards this property tax, because that's why you're getting it back, right? So this is sort of getting to some kind of general idea of resources available to the people living in the housing unit, determines as a ratio of that to property tax paid, what we're going to get. This is something to always make some notes on for your reviewer. This is probably even a conversation with your reviewer before they get going on it, or a note to say, come talk to me to clarify, because this is something that if you're not sitting at the table talking through with someone, you know, as a reviewer, right, you can start to say, well, did they misunderstand which of these three situations it was, blah, blah, blah. So sometimes your notes to reviewers are not so much guiding them in a certain direction as demonstrating that you know what you're talking about and you did a thorough job interviewing and understanding the scenario. Special property tax refund. This is something you actually will have to do a little bit of calculation on. You'll find this out from the property tax statement. The property tax statement will show the upcoming year's taxes and the year before's taxes. It's actually not that hard to figure out. We do see it where someone gets an additional, it's not $1,000. Don't look for an extra $1,000 on the return. This is the maximum it can be, but it's like a little extra boost to acknowledge that they experienced a substantial property tax increase. So you're going to want to quick do a, you know, calculate the difference between this year and the last, and then make sure it's more than $100. Always call someone over if you need a little help looking for that. Okay. We're going to talk about non-taxable household income. Non-taxable household income is being mentioned because as part of that process of saying, okay, what are the resources available to this household to pay the property tax? The state has decided that we ought to consider sources that go beyond what is taxed. So no one's going to ever owe because they have these sources, but we might say, well, you had this available to you, you don't quite get as much credit. So if you remember the way the renter's credit is now, we just start with the AGI and then we go straight to the credit. For the M1PR property tax, we're going to start with the AGI. We're going to add in a few more sources, and then we're going to get their household income. If you want to look on your gray sheet, take out the gray sheet right now. find mine, I'll tell you where to look. And flip to page 3, third page, they're not numbered, but where it says homeowners, mobile homeowners only. You will see, we have a series of questions. Well, I suppose it's mostly just the first question. Asking about other sources of income that a person might have that are not taxable. This is the stuff we're talking about when they need to add it back in. So, we should note too, we have a few subtractions. These are pretty key, but you're also gonna see these, and notice them, right? So if someone is 65 or has a disability or dependents, or retirement account contributions. There's spots for you to check that on the M1PR, and they'll give those people a little, it's equivalent to what we talked about with the adjustments on Saturday, right? Where ahead of that AGI, you get to take some money off before we start calculating the credit. So the impact, like I've said, right, we see more resources, we see a lower credit. What is not household income? So when you pose the question to your taxpayer, you know, we try to do it in plain language. It's a little hard to do, and you can't say what are your what are your non-taxable household income sources that follow the M1PR, right? So we're gonna start to get into, well, what else do you get support from? And they're gonna start listing some of the benefits they're eligible for. And we're gonna want to make sure that we know that these ones are not what counts as household income. Child support, I'm going to call out because the reasoning behind that one is that I'm pretty sure I'm ad-libbing a little bit here, is that the person paying the child support has already been taxed on it. Gifts is another big one too, where we're going to leave that out because I believe that has been taxed before. Dependents we're going to leave out because the nature of the dependent relationship, we've already done some tests to establish that that's not a person substantially contributing to the resources of the home. Most of the rest of this stuff, or a lot of it, and especially the benefits are just because our clients are lower income. This is the kind of thing they're going to mention. Things that they didn't actually like get money for, we're not going to count as household income because that's not something that they could have used to pay the property tax. The other one are certain, you know, property tax and state tax refund things, right? Where it's a post-tax sum of money that we're not gonna start to ding you for on another credit. The bigger thing to think about are what are types of non-taxable household income that we need to add back in. This is where SSI is the big one. There's programs called General Assistance and MFIP as well that people can get, and these are where they get cash benefits. This is a tricky one where we don't have great tax forms for these, right? Because they are not taxable benefits. They will sometimes get letters from the county. This is the kind of program that I work with in my day job, and I know for a fact that the counties are really hard to deal with and give really crappy documentation. Often what we end up doing here is just letting them report to us the amount. If you can remember back to when we talked through SSI versus RSDI on the income lesson, we also know what the max SSI payment is that they should be getting. Now, the caveat to all these, and I'll get into why this is included a little later, it's pretty rare that we're ever going to see these for a homeowner, just because of the nature of owning a home where you need a substantial bit of income and you need to have a substantial lack of income to be getting these. But the key with these is you're going to often get some verbal reporting. More types, non-taxable scholarship amounts. So this would be someone who has a, for themselves, remember, not a dependent. Actually, we should double check on that, but I think that would follow.
Somebody needs to look it up.
Yeah. We don't add back non-taxable retirement contributions. Workers' comp, dependent care. We don't start to add back some of those like tax. Or sorry. We do add these back in. I apologize. We do add these back in. Yeah. This is all pretty rare, and you'll have help to cover this. I don't expect anyone to just like nail this their first time doing it themselves. But just to get you familiar with things that you need to add back in. A lot of this kind of stuff, I guess, is in the area, right? You can think of it as like, hey, I could have put that towards the property tax, but instead I got a tax benefit off of it, right? Either because we did it for something else like an HSA or dependent care or retirement. That kind of thing. Okay. And it should be noted, sorry, that some of this stuff, like the retirement contributions, if it's on a W-2 with a letter, that'll automatically get added to the M1PR. So some of this stuff TaxSlayer does, no. All right, like I said, you're gonna have help to figure that kind of stuff out. The bigger thing to make sure you're clear on is let's not waste 20 minutes going down the wrong path and starting the wrong forms for someone, right? So who needs to do the rent credit? Who needs to do the M1PR? First, two are straightforward. They lived in a rental unit, rent credit. If they owned a home, homeowner credit. If they rented and then bought a home that they were living in by January 2nd, this is the case where they would get one of each, and we would do them both separately. Nursing home, foster care, assisted living, other type of place, that's rent. Owned a mobile home and paid rent for the lot, only M1PR, no rent credit there, even though there is a rent portion. Now, real quick, I'm going to bring up the 2023 renters credit. This is something that I would say this is the most likely past year type of return that you will do because they tend to be simple. And if you remember, this is the one that's going to expire in August. So we're going to be in a little bit of a hurry to get these done for people. All of the stuff we've taught you about the rent credit so far was brand new for 2024. For 2023, the renter's credit was on the M1PR. It's going to be pretty straightforward. You will do an M1PR. It'll walk you through it. It looks very similar. What you will need to think through and remember, and we'll remind you of this if we do one, is as part of it being on the M1PR for 2023 and before, although we don't worry about before now, just 2023, we did consider all this other income for the renters as well. And when we start talking about renters, we're talking about a lot more people who get SSI and general assistance and MFIP. So these are the folks who are going to be coming in this summer who we're really going to have to talk through public benefits with, are our renters who need to do a 2023 renters credit. And again, you'll have help for those. But yeah, that's kind of why this is still in there. I've never seen a homeowner come in with these just because of the benefits are not very generous and owning a home is very expensive. But absolutely we get renters in this situation. Okay. Yeah.
And that,
No, because he didn't live in and own that home on, it doesn't say that, but you have to own and live in it. That's part of being a homestead. I'm pretty positive on that. Yeah, that's why it says lived in it on 1-2. Yeah, that we don't get that though. Nope, then it's not a homestead, so we wouldn't have to worry about it. We don't get very complex situations with this. Not in that sense.
Mia was training our customer support volunteers next door. Mia's also a site manager in the summer, so.
Speech.
Yeah.
All right, I want to get us out on time and I'm pretty close to doing it. But I did just run through a handful of topics. Does anyone have any burning questions on any of those? Or am I good to wrap us up? If they're like, what about this scenario? You can come up and grab me after and we can talk through it because I don't have time to think through those things right now. All right.
If I tax, computer tax, or choice of customer.
Yeah, we'll talk about that after. I would say we tried. I've never had a customer who chose to paper file and we just did it just because they wanted to. We talked to them and the best way to do it is to e-file. And so we really try to, but that said, I'm not just going to order anyone to e-file. I'm going to make them understand why. That's more for your manager to come help with if someone's pretty stubborn about paper. All right, so something that you can do at the end of every shift. I don't know how often you ask them to. This is more Holly territory.
It's me again. So we have if you go to the computer links document, if you want to get it, somewhere near the top, if you scroll all the way up, actually, all the way. End of shift volunteer survey is up there. And this is like a really easy way to tell me and Sarah and Mary, what is going on. Did you have a great experience with the customer that you want to tell the story? Did you have a weird experience with a customer you want to tell the story? And maybe we'll follow up with you and be like, hey, what, are you okay? But it's mostly going to be great experiences, just for the record. And I really want to hear if you're like, hey, I'm in the manual and this is super weird, this section, or I wish the manual had this thing. That's the kind of thing I love to hear about in the survey. So this is like just an easy way at the end of the shift for you to share something that happened if you want to. It's totally optional, but your site managers are going to be here all the time and you can tell them whatever. But sometimes if you have a great idea and you tell them, then they have to tell someone else and then someone else has to tell me. It's just harder to get your good ideas back to us. So
this is one of those things where if you remember we talked about in the first training or two that this is a uniquely large and well supported resource wise like VITA operation. So we have a lot of people thinking about ways to fine tune the process. And the more input we get, the better. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
thank you. Okay, everybody, raise your hand if you have completed your certification tests already. Oh, Stan is the early bird. So reminder everyone, what Stan has done and what we're all going to do is 3 tests. There's the volunteer standards of conduct. I wish I didn't have this gum in my mouth. Intake interview and quality review, and then basic tax law. So you're going to choose basic at the beginning, unless you really feel really confident and you want to try to take the advanced test from the beginning. That would be cool if you want to, but no pressure. Stan, what do you want to share with us about tips or what can help us as we are going? Yes. Yeah. So the test booklet has all of the questions in it. So you can write all your answers in there ahead of time. They're the exact same questions. Yeah.
And again, make those notes and hold on to it for next year, not to like game the system, but like it just helps you, you know, to refresh. You will go through like a long stretch of time without doing taxes. And yeah.
How long does the book take?
Yeah, it sounds about right.
The easy ones and get the volunteer standards of conduct out of the way. The place to go is go to the training site. There's a big turquoise like where I'm ready to get certified. How do I get certified? And that'll have the link to the instructions and the link to the website to do it. Wendy.
Sure, let's just say it's.
You would have to. Yeah.
Because we had one volunteer who did.
That would be like a mid-tax season relocation, but yeah. Yeah. Everyone in the country that does VITA, yep. Yeah, that's the caveat, yeah.
This. I mean, I can share it for free.
What specifically are you referring to? Anything?
YouTube channel.
Oh, YouTube channel? Yeah, you can totally share it for free. We don't have them like listed where like anyone could search it and find it, but you can absolutely share the YouTube channel. If we're talking about the manual, you can share the PDF, but we do ask like, let us know if you want to print it. Probably need to have something better about copyright in the front of it, because it's like a lot of work, but there's some tension between wanting to share all the resources and also wanting to have our own brand that other people aren't just like messing with.
No, what I mean, we will not share the information of this stuff, but we will share how he there by his way, his own way. Is that possible?
I don't totally understand what you're asking about.
What
We can
I'm
talk about it
saying is like,
We can talk about it in a few minutes.
okay.
You have to take all three in one city.
No, and you don't even have to finish any of them in one sitting, which Stan kind of alluded to. Like, I get through this pretty quick now. I've done it several years in a row. I can't do it in one evening. I gotta break it up into like a couple because it just is dreary otherwise.
You can retake this every year.
Yes, because the laws change every year. It's not really a studying thing because it's open book. So it's gonna happen is you're gonna read the question and then you're gonna have to look back in your resources to figure it out. Do not study, sit down and do it and take your time. I can't, yeah.
The 80%.
Which is what, 24 out of 32? That's 75. 24 out of 30.
We can tell you, logistics will tell you. Once you start, you're gonna have to log your hours. So that will tell you how many hours you've done. Wendy, sorry, another question. Wendy, failed multiple times. And you cannot volunteer. So if you fail once, you need to pause and email us. Because if you fail twice, they'll be like, sorry, you can't get served.
Like seriously, even if you're like you're one question off and you're like, oh, I know why I screwed up. Don't do like just double check with someone. Yeah. No, that's just yeah.
Tomorrow. So just to prepare for tomorrow, we're gonna do a lot of practicing tomorrow. So if you're like, I feel ready to take the certification test, that's right where it's supposed to be. Tomorrow, you're gonna come and we're gonna get 5 practice returns. You're gonna get 5 practice customers with all their documents. And we're gonna have 5 helpers here who are gonna be going around. And so once you've completed all 5, you can start on the certification tests. If you're done before 8:30, you can start on these and get a jump on it tomorrow night. So it's gonna be really fun.
I don't know if we made it clear too, like you're gonna be online to do the test. They will also ask you to do returns, and then the answer to the question will be like, what was the AGI for the little return you just did? Obviously, remember, it's a federal certification. We're not gonna get into the Minnesota stuff. But yeah. Yes. Yes, you should, yeah. Stop for a day and leave it and forget about it and then come back. Yeah, you can exit and enter. Yep.